welcome to Querétaro, here in central Mexico. I arrived here yesterday from Guanajuato after a short bus trip, and I'm here for a couple of days to explore this very historical and often overlooked city, just a few hours here from Mexico City. So the history of Querétaro comes quite interestingly to me. I must admit that I hadn't heard much about it before I looked into the place. But it's very fascinating, and I think it's an often overlooked place when people are traveling through Mexico. So the history here spans back more than 1,000 years. It was originally part of the Aztec Empire in pre-colonial times. And then when the Spanish conquered the Aztecs, it became part of the New Spain name. Querétaro also has ties to the Independence War. It has ties to the Mexican-American War, and even today is still maintained primarily as an independent state within the larger states of Mexico. So it was first colonized by the Spanish in the mid-1500s, and after the conquest of the Aztec Empire in the early 16th century, became one of the northernmost cities in the new Spanish Empire. Querétaro was officially designated a city in 1655. It became a very important city to the War of Independence, where the first plans for the independence fight were hatched. Unfortunately for most of the conspirators, their plans were discovered, and most were ultimately imprisoned for decades, some as far away as the Philippines. However, these plans ultimately led to the initial battles for independence, but because of the discovery of the plans that were here, Querétaro remained under Spanish control throughout the entire independence war until the end. During the Mexican-American War in the 1840s, when the United States took control of the state of Texas, which was at the time part of Mexico, during that war, the capital of Mexico was actually moved to here in Querétaro. Since then, Querétaro remains officially an independent state within Mexico, as I mentioned, and now has a population of more than 1.5 million people. And so today, as we wander through Querétaro's history, we're going to start here in Guerrero Park. Now, Guerrero Park is a beautiful spot here, right in the middle of the city, surrounded by old colonial buildings, some very, very, very well-maintained trees. And this statue is in memorial to the second president of Mexico, Vicente Guerrero, who is considered a legend and a hero to all of Mexico. So the skies are looking a little threatening today. It is a nice, perfect weather day here today, though. It's about 8 degrees Celsius and overcast, so a great day for around the city. Got my rain jacket with me just in case. It's the first time I've had my rain jacket with me for any point of this trip since I've not come across rain very often during this time, and it's been pretty dry, pretty humid, but little rain. So let's have a little walk around the town and check out some of the sights, as there's some really kind of cool, interesting history here. And one of the other spots we're going to be checking out as well is an old pyramid temple just sort of southwest of the city. So here we have the Fountain of Neptune, which was originally built back in 1797. It actually was a purpose-made fountain to supply water to the locals. So this bronze statue that sits here in the middle is actually from the 80s. There was originally a stone version of this statue when this was originally built in 1797. That statue was taken down and placed inside a municipal building nearby, and the bronze statue was set up here instead. So we are in the officially titled Museum of the Reconstruction of the Republic. And it's just here a few blocks from the park we started in, and no charge to get in. Some beautiful old paintings in here. Painted in 1945. So after the new constitution was signed in 1857, what ended up happening from there is that Maximilio III took control of Mexico. And here in Querétaro, specifically, there were skirmishes between liberals and conservatives. The conservatives were supporting Maximilio III, who was also receiving support from Napoleon in France. So this upstairs area here is looking at some of that history, going through the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, during these skirmishes, during the battles for Querétaro and other areas around it. And there's a ton of stuff here. So we're just going to go, we saw the first two downstairs, where this is room number 3, which looks at the status of the city in the 1850s and some of the battle plans that were going on at the time. So in 1867, there was actually a series of battles that were fought over the city of Querétaro, which are numbered here, you can see on the map. And you can see a surrounding area that were completely surrounded by military in battle for the city and the city's control. So here's a reproduction photo of Maximiliano de Habsburgo, who was controlling the area, supported by Napoleon from France, and led to the numerous fights and skirmishes here around the city. Finally, in 1867, Maximiliano was put on trial and found guilty of war crimes. So here's a map of the topographical map of the city of Querétaro here in 1867, after Maximiliano was removed from power. The city was in a state of ruin at that time, and efforts were made starting shortly thereafter to rebuild it and to restore it. And you can see here is a map from 1917 showing a map of the city at that point, which had become quite expansive in comparison to what had been previous. Just an outside shot here. There's a little courtyard here in this museum. Beautiful old building. It's a temporary exhibit they have set up in here. Some old show posters from the Grand Theatre, which is just down the street here. We'll see that in a little bit. So this would have been just after the French incursions here and the beginning of the restorations of the city. And what better way to bring people back than with entertainment? Let's gather our things and continue onward. So just so I get some of my facts straight and no one yells at me in the comments about trying to rewrite history or something, Maximilian I of Mexico was actually Austrian, and he was an Austrian archduke who became the emperor of the Second Empire of Mexico from 1864 until 1867. So he was, as I mentioned upstairs, responsible for much of the fighting that happened around the area of Querétaro, and the reason for that was because he was supported by Napoleon III, the Emperor of France. But once his support from Napoleon ended, the battles began for taking back control of Querétaro, the state, the city. Once he was finally apprehended in 1867, he was put on trial and then executed. Great history here, tons of information. This museum is fantastic. If you get a chance to come here, just based on the sheer volume of knowledge. It was in Spanish only, so keep that in mind, but most of it you can infer from the information that's on the walls. So here in front of me is the Grand Theatre of the Republic here in Querétaro, and this theater actually dates back to the 1850s and has been used for many significant moments in Mexican history. For example, the trial of the former Mexican Emperor Maximilian I actually happened within this building when they sentenced him to death and then later hung him. As well as that, back in 1917, the Constitution of Mexico, after the Revolutionary War in 1917, was actually signed inside this building here as well. Some pretty significant historical moments occurred in this building. It looks like there's an event going on, so I won't be able to get inside. This is it from the outside. So we're just going to continue on down here. A few more spots to check out. This is all an easy walk as well. It's nice and flat downtown. It's all within a handful of blocks of each other, so definitely worth checking out some of these places if you do come to Querétaro. So we're here in the park where this statue is of Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez, and it's a very impressive statue. You can see that there's, eagles all around the bottom, and if you don't know the history, it's quite interesting. And Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez was the wife of the, for lack of a better term, the mayor of Querétaro in the 1800s. She was also, unknowingly to him, a big supporter of the fight for independence, and used to host meetings of the conspirators in the mayor's house, under the guise of them being like essentially book clubs. And so they would meet on the regular, formulating plans, coming up with the ideas for the independence fight, gathering supplies, whatever was necessary. And so eventually what happened was that the word about the conspirators was discovered by the government, and they actually asked the mayor of Querétaro to do a house-to-house investigation of who was involved, not knowing the entire time up until this point that his wife was one of them. So eventually her participation was discovered by her husband, and she was imprisoned in her room at that point to ensure that she could not continue to exchange information with the conspirators. The legend has it that she was actually using essentially Morse code and tapped on the wall of the room that she was imprisoned in to pass information to the conspirators so that they could get out of town before they get caught. Eventually, her involvement was discovered along with her own husband's, basically by, not reporting on her. And so both were separately imprisoned for many years. So the Grito de Dolores, which was basically the war cry of Dolores, was inspired by his wife. And it is continued to be celebrated every year during Independence Day, which is what we saw when we were in Guadalajara during the Independence Day celebrations. And so the cry of Dolores was first proclaimed in September of 1810, which then kicked off the Mexican War of Independence. And so, you can see why someone like Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez is so celebrated here in Mexico, because she was basically the mother of the revolution, if you want to think of it that way. She was a key in orchestrating much of the rebel work that was done, including, gathering supplies, gathering support, organizing, the whole bit. So, pretty remarkable story. I think it's pretty cool. I've been pretty fascinated with a lot of the Mexican history here as I've been going through the country. It's clearly a lot more than I ever knew about or was ever taught about. And so that's why I've been sharing a lot of it, because I think it's kind of cool, and I think it's important for, people maybe outside of Mexico to learn a bit more about some of the interesting history here that goes back thousands of years, and has been continuously fought over for centuries by the Spanish, by the French, by, native Aztec and Mayan groups, and then internal struggles, and then fights with America as well. So it's been pretty cool to learn some of this stuff, for sure. This is a pretty famous statue in the city here, known as the Danzante Conchero Chichimeca, which was a traditional Chichimeca dancer. which was one of the local indigenous tribes in the area. And now I'm going to get my rain jacket on. Well, there you go. I've been carrying my rain jacket now since the end of July and haven't had to take it in my backpack in the entire time until today, finally. We're going to head over here to the Central Garden, which is just across the street, and maybe park ourselves under a tree for a few minutes and see if this rain passes. I'm actually going to go over this side of the building since it seems to be raining in a particular direction. It was just a matter of time, I guess, before it started raining, because it looked like it was going to all day. Well, that didn't take long. Just sat down for about 10 or 15 minutes and the rain went away. So we just made our way here to the Jardin Zenea, which is one of the larger green squares in the city. Traditionally, in most places, like the Plaza de Armas is usually like the biggest of the squares in most Mexican cities, but here it's actually not. It's this one. And yeah, it's a nice place to come, and maybe not on a rainy day, but on a sunny day to come and check out the park. So all the way around it here is some different things. There's some different monuments. There's the big churches right there poking through the trees. And then actually just down the street a little bit further from here is the regional museum for the city as well. So that museum would be more about the city's history as well. But we've already kind of covered that off, I think, with the other museum we saw earlier. But there are certainly no shortage. There are a few others around immediately in the area, dealing with the history of the area and the Revolutionary War, the Mexican-American War, the, fight for independence from the Spaniards, just on and on and on. So it's just loads of history around. And every corner you walk around, there's something to see or, something to check out.